G'day, g'day, g'day. Mathematical KM here. Remember, their initials, not a title. Keith Malumbi. This is round 3 of the Canberra Chess Club Canberra Cup, I believe. Round 3. And it's another white hippopotamus on the way. Playing a young up-and-comer, Sharav. And let's go. So we'll just... This is, I think, hippo number 104 or 5 in the chess.com collection, and you'll note the first 1, 2, 3, 4 moves were normal, changing the order slightly here with A3 early. A3 is one of the moves that we're going to make, especially with a knight on C6. So we're just encouraging that bishop to put up or shut up. And young Shrav chooses to keep the pin. So we continue developing our hippopotamus. We go in with again with the knight blocking the f-pawn. We do want to play h3, so we put it in now, keeping prophylaxis, keeping the knight and the bishop out from playing fun and games on the diagonal. So he comes as far as he can with the light bishop, completing our hippopotamus. He castles, I castle as well, which also breaks the pin on this knight in case you want to do something with it. He's swinging his kingside knight around to the queenside. Now this is a typical, and you'll notice I broke the pin on the king, otherwise this would not have been a possibility, but harass that bishop. And in fact, if we wanted to swap off for that bishop, then we've got it. It's not trapped in the sense that we're going to win it, but we can certainly trade, most likely, this knight for that pawn, which does give a semi-open file on the A file to black. So he did need to move the bishop to B6 to arrange that. So that's the capture back he'd be chasing. Let's keep the computers. And in fact, snatching that bishop off is my apparently second best move. But I don't really need to pounce on that, because I guess he could go... If he moved the bishop to C5, I could play B5. B4, I should say. Can't come here, can't take that one. So that bishop's kind of on toast if we want it. And at the moment our knight hasn't been kicked. Let's keep that tension and finish our... We've now got the hippo pawn structure. The full thick-skinned hippo. This knight's been developed. And the last setting up move would be bishop here. He's sending that kingside knights come all the way around. Always take a look at what knights can do. Not that much. I mean, it is, to look at it, that knight is the one piece with two protectors. Not much of a threat on this pawn. But on my D pawn, he's got that knight and a bishop, but I've got a pawn and a queen. So it's not a big threat at the moment. And in fact, we're up 1.3 and nobody's taken any casualties so far. So bishop to the fianchetto. So we've got the full thick-skinned hippo, accepting that we've developed that knight and put in the optional castling. So we're in the right sort of place. Now I'm entertaining ideas of, and that also keeps that bishop out of that square. So ideas of winning that bishop with a pawn are in my head. It's one of the things I'm thinking about at this point in time. But you've got to keep an eye on your opponent. Now that's gone up to 2.2 for white, which I find interesting because he's just organised a battery on that pawn which has only got the one defender. I mean, I would think that it's a pretty typical thing for the hippo's opponent. I think usually white, but in this case black. Take, and getting a queen in my king's face. And the standard, and it's not even in the top 3 moves there, but which is interesting. But the way of keeping that bishop out is called a miss. They want a d4, which may have tactically ended up defending that threat, but this is more human. We've got the bishop and the king protecting Harry. He's lining a rook up in the middle. Normal moves. Still got nobody's dead, and it's up to 2.4 for white, which is interesting. That, if I choose to play it, will come with tempo, but with the king there, keeping the whole little fortress for a little while and working on winning a piece over on the queen side is what I'm thinking about. And here comes Ari, not Harry, but Ari. Thank you, Simon Williams. Okay, they don't like it. They want d4, smashing open the middle, but I'm fighting this war on 2 fronts, the king side and the queen side, and if the middle wants to stay quiet, I'm not that unhappy about that. Now, that's called a mistake, and the computer makes sense to have black kick my white knight, but it's just going to force the issue and force the knight to take the bishop. But that knight threatening that bishop forever can't be pleasant. So I guess d5 does make sense. But he's got the 2 knights covering the b4 square. And really, I'm kind of hoping to get in b4, a5, win the bishop. It's not like he can move either of these and give his bishop a path out. That one will be no good, that's no good, and that's no good. So mission get the bishop, but that involves b4. And it makes a bit of sense. Sharav is got 2 knights protecting that square. So let's see what we can load up. We've got the queen, 1 piece supporting the push, with a look or a thought to eventually getting a bishop as well supporting the push. But it's a war on 2 fronts. Now, that's given as a mistake. It does end up being a mistake, but I'm not saying I played it out as well as I could have. But I'm thinking that I'm seeing the old rook lift, and once the rook comes across, he will have the rook, the bishop, and the queen, 3 pieces focused on my h-pawn, and I'll only have 1 piece other than the king guarding. So not a happy state of affairs. I cannot afford to let that happen. Strangely enough, that makes sense. e4 is best, which gets that bishop in the way of the rook, stopping the rook from completing the rook lift. Basically a bit of a spanner in that particular attack plan. So e4 would do that. g4. Well, the bishop's not going to come to e4, so that it kind of achieves the same. The bishop will need to move in the way of the rook. And I've played g4. The bishop goes to its only square. Strangely enough, and ask the computer about that one later on the weekend, bishop takes the pawn is best. So that's sacking material. Let's have just a tiny look at that. Let's get my camera out of the way. That is, because it threatens the queen. I'm saying, why would I not take the bishop after it takes that pawn? If you're looking at the small board there, it's because knight takes bishop threatens his queen, so he has to take that, and then I take. My king's a bit open. He's got an obvious check with the rook. Let's have just a 2-second look. And that's plus 2.9. And quite a different look. Let's get rid of that and go to what was played. Screen back. And certainly a more human move is to move the bishop out of the way of the pawn. Interesting that the computer wanted him to sack the bishop for the pawn. Would have opened my king a little, but at the cost of significant material. Okay. Computer wanted f4. Opening the middle and letting him move his rook. It's often very hard to analyse these tricky middle game positions, but I've got a simple plan. Support that push. If I get the push in, then I win the bishop with a5. Or alternatively, if things haven't changed after b4, then there's b5 forking the two rooks. Forking the two knights. So what does happen? Okay, so he's panicked and... I'm not sure, Sharav might watch this and comment. But in comes f5. What I'm seeing is a diagonal that goes rook queen. And say that 3.1, g times f5 is the very best. 2.8 is f4, which is increasing the tension with the explosion there. And 2.75 again is just taking the bishop. Now, it's a mistake, takes it back to 0.21. He needs to find d5, which is kicking the knight into taking the bishop and a complex series of... And then he'd take back. Interesting, but what I can tell you is that the move that was not to be played, and I guess this is the very turning point of the game. I mean, white did have the better position, but there's a blunder, and to capitalise on it, I've now pinned the rook to the queen. So I've got the rook pinned to the queen. Now moving the bishop here makes sense because should I just take the rook, he can take back with the bishop and he's got the battery aimed at the pawn, and I've only really got the king there. Other pieces take a little bit of time to get across. That would be a heck of a mistake for me to take that rook now. We'll in fact see what would have happened. Tell me how bad that was. Inaccuracy, yep, for sure. Get me out of the way, and let's get rid of that inaccuracy. Over the board, I knew that was going to be a mistake to do that. Let the pin stay. So instead, I've got the two pieces supporting the B4 push that we've been waiting for. So playing on the queen side. If he moves a knight away, I can trap the bishop. If he doesn't move a knight away, I can pawn fork and win a knight. So I've got a piece coming. So he's got a pawn for the piece, and probably from there, none of his next moves, now that he's down a piece, trading the remaining knight for the bishop might not be the wisest, but he's gone for that. So now he's got a pawn for the minor piece. We're up 2 points of material. I think that's not a bad situation. Both my knights are out there. Bishop's on a sweet diagonal. I've got a guaranteed up the exchange at some point. So we'd like trades, and when we have to, we will go up the exchange. So he's now forcing. It's been there for a long time. We'll just go the straight trade. And now we've got a queen and 2 rooks and 2 minor pieces versus a queen and 2 rooks and 1 minor piece. But let's not forget we've got, just waiting for when we're ready for it, going up the exchange here. So it's a gradual, just not playing for an immediate checkmate. It's just winning the material and grinding him down. Okay, so he's removed the pin. So we've got to cash in the chips. It's best. Okay, so he's got his queen on this pawn. It's not going to be that easy to get the bishop behind the queen. So it's now going to be a little slower to try and get his attack over it. My king is a little more exposed. But I've got a rook that can come to an open file. Knight can come around if need be. Knight to G1's worth considering for getting protection on that pawn. But more importantly, if we can get some more, just 1 or 2 more trades, and we should be very sweet. So to start with, let's go a pawn for a pawn. He's moved his queen back. I'd like very much to get these queens off. And so I actually saw this 2-move little strategy is threaten the, well, at the moment it's not a trade, but if he did something like this, then it'd be a trade getting the queens off. But queen here, threatening his queen. He's got to move his queen to keep it on. Why not take the free pawn? And it's don't take the free pawn because, well, I can't play here with check and then get the queens off unless my queen is protected there, which it isn't yet. So the tactic is, let's offer the queen trade straight up. He takes the pawn. I move the knight. Now, he could get his queen to safety now, but unless he spots it, we've got check, which would force the trade. Rook across, that's excellent, but check, no other move. Look at that. We take, rook comes out, the knight can take a pawn. It's threatening another one. Sure, it's protected at the moment. Bishop out. Okay, so he's got the bishop lined up on that pawn. if he can get a double threat on that pawn, he might have something. Let's get my rook on the open g-file. Okay, so if I'm not paying attention, that would be bad. So let's protect the pawn with the rook. You'll notice how many of my pieces are on the dark squares, given that his only remaining bishop is a light. So he's lined that bishop up on my c-pawn. But effectively, the question here is, would you trade that pawn for that pawn? Sure. Take, take. Okay, now that bishop is lined up on this pawn, he's not going to take it, but I wouldn't mind the ability to get that rook all the way to the end. And if we can clean up these two pawns, is kind of what I'm thinking about, then it's going to be a easier mate. So, pawn forward. And now I've got pawn and knight on that one, so if he doesn't take me or push, then I will take probably with the, maybe with the pawn. Pawn or knight, either is good. But he takes. I can take with that rook. He's threatening the knight. And believe you me, if I move that knight over there, and if he could somehow teleport that rook to checkmate for black, black wins, something I've got to remain aware of. But having said that, we're up 3 pieces to 2. We just need to make sure that that can never be the case. If he does get this rook around and down somehow, then this rook, if I keep it around, can block. And the bishop can't do anything about it. I should be safe as houses. So let's get my knight onto a dark square. He's thinking about it. I mean, it's a little bit slow, and there is the chance to block. Let's threaten the bishop, which isn't being protected at the moment. Bishop goes back. Probably should have seen and done this. Rook to e6, it's not there. Wouldn't have been the worst move even now. Is lining these guys up for a forced trade. But I thought, let's get this pawn forward and prevent any potential shenanigans with pawns on the knight when the knight's protecting the rook, which is in danger. He comes forward with that pawn, but now that I've got that sorted, let's trade rooks. It's not a, yeah, if you take me, it's a trade of rooks. If you move your rook, you lose your bishop. What did it think of his rook to d7? It was excellent. But better was swapping the rooks off. But then he'd be left with that light bishop, not have a rook and a knight. But for now, there goes the bishop. That's his last hope, that pawn, in many senses. So, let us block its path forward with a rook. Get a knight here. And we can take it with a knight. Or even with a rook, threatening the trade. But, yeah. Trying to activate his king. It's excellent, but... Okay, knight's in position to capture the pawn or allow the rook to capture the pawn. But that was a mistake, and it's quite a beautiful little checkmate. The knight covers that one. His rook is in the king's way, as is that pawn. But the rook jumping into the king's way would probably get sacked by the king. Mate in one. So it was a nice checkmate. So quickly have a look at the review. So fairly steady. There was one moment when, I think if we have a quick look, it's been a lot to us, but it's dipped down to nearly even just for one quick moment. Let's have a look at what move he needed to find. He needed to spot D5, and even from there, that just forces that trade. It's not even very human. And the next moves are best moves, getting rooks into the middle, plus 1.5. So I'll forgive myself on that one. But relatively straightforward, nice curve to the game. 84 to 72. Had a miss. No blunders for me. 2200 to 1500. Opening at 96 to 90. And then 69 to 50. So did feel a bit of control in fighting on the two eastern and western fronts, with the middle staying quite quiet. So it was a dual front white hippo, and chalked that one up. There were some interesting things, and looking at when to smash open the middle is perhaps the area for me to work on. But nice game. Like, share and subscribe. We're up to 96 subscribers. It'd be nice to get to 100. Okay, see you guys next time.